Hey, what's up, you guys? Look, this is part two of my FMG9 debate series. Started this series a little while ago, but I completely forgot about it. I moved on and sort of started my Moab with Every Gun series. But just the other day I was going through my videos and I noticed that I still had this one to do, so I thought I'd finish it off. So this is the part two, conclusion as well of the series. And this is the... so this basically I'll be talking about FMG9s in Australian matches, but I'm going to extend that also to New Zealand matches as well. Originally I was just going to talk about Australian matches, but I think it's relevant to talk also about New Zealand matches, as a couple of times just this week I've been playing, and the host has been located in New Zealand. So yeah, so I thought I'll get started. So basically, I think it's important you quickly go back and sort of watch my first video regarding the FMG9 usage in one-bar matches, because I talk about how dying works in that match. I also talk about how hit markers work. Now I'll just quickly go over it, but I do believe that you should go back and watch it anyway, because it goes into more depth in that video than what I will here. But basically, the time it takes for you to get hit markers on enemies is dependent on how far away you live from the host player. And the way dying works in this game is, if you die on one person's screen, then it updates that to everyone else's screen, and you'll die on their screen as well. So dying has a higher priority than everything else. Okay, so I've got quite a few things to get through, so I'll just quickly get through them. So first of all, do I think people in Western Australia, for example, should be able to use akimbo FMG9s? Well, generally, if you look at the population distribution of Australia, you've got about 90% of the population that live on the east coast. You've got about 5% that live on the west coast, and you've got another 5% that live everywhere else. So going by that logic, 90% of the time, the host will be located on the east coast. 5% of the time, the host will be located on the west coast, and the other 5% of the time, the host will be located elsewhere. So going by that logic, 90% of the time, people from Western Australia will be at a disadvantage. They will have a lag disadvantage, because they'll be getting hit markers later than what people that live on the east coast will get. So does that mean they should be able to use akimbo FMG9s? Well, I say no. I did believe for a time yes, but now I say no. And the reason I say no is because even though us Perth players, or West Australian players, I don't want to discriminate, but even though we're at a lag disadvantage, I think still that the advantage afforded by the akimbo FMG9s is still too great. I think it's still too much of an advantage, and it doesn't equally offset the disadvantage that we are at with our connection. And so I still don't believe that we should be able to use akimbo FMG9s. Now this doesn't apply if someone else in the match is using akimbo FMG9s, or someone on the enemy team, I should say, is using akimbo FMG9s. As soon as someone else on the other team pulls out FMG9 akimbo, I think then that it's open season. Basically, I think anyone should be able to use akimbo FMG9s from that point on, just because you need to. Otherwise, you basically don't have a chance. Although there are, I will go through. So I should say I have gone through alternatives on some other videos that you can do to counter people that are using akimbo FMG9s. But still, the best way to counter FMG9s is to use FMG9s. So if someone else is using them on the enemy team, I think then that you're justified in using them as well. So the other time I think that you're justified in using akimbo FMG9s, and this only applies to people that live on the west coast, is if the host is located in New Zealand. Now just in the last week or two, I've had a lot of matches actually where the host has been a New Zealand host. And while the connection's not as bad as a one-bar match, it's pretty close. And I've already talked about in my one-bar matches video in part one, why I think akimbo FMG9s are justified to be used in one-bar matches. And so given that New Zealand hosts are basically almost one-bar matches, I think the same applies to them as well. And I think then that you have the right, as a West Australian player only, to use akimbo FMG9s. But of course, then if a West Australian person will use akimbo FMG9s and someone on the eastern states is on the opposite team, then they also have the right to use akimbo FMG9s because obviously someone else is using akimbo FMG9s against them. But yeah, that's the effect I think that New Zealanders have regarding FMG9s. So that really only leaves us left with hackers. So basically, I think that if there's a hacker in the match, I also think that then you have the right to use akimbo FMG9s, obviously because they have a huge advantage over you. And even by using akimbo FMG9s, you're still not going to bridge that advantage because they will likely also be using akimbo FMG9s, and so then you're obviously not at any advantage because you're both using the same gun, but they also can know exactly where you are. They can see through walls, or they can have infinite UAV or whatever. So yeah, you pretty much have to use akimbo FMG9s, and even then you'll probably still lose. Yeah, so the only other scenario that I haven't touched upon is when you're host. Now I think the host has the right also to use akimbo FMG9s, and here's why. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm host, my frame rate basically goes to hell. As you can see in this video, my frame rate's pretty good, but I'm not hosting this match. But and I've also done smoothing to the image, so it looks smoother than it actually is. But when I'm host, my frame rate goes really low, depending on the stage. But Bakara is not too bad, Interchange isn't too bad. But I'm telling you, if I go on Carbon or Village or most stages, my frame rate is 15, 20 frames per second. I don't know if that happens because I'm in West Australia or what, but it's ridiculous. It's rubbish. So yeah, I think that by using FMG9s, you offset that frame rate. Now, because your frame rate is so low, you're also shooting slower, and so that's why I think you should be able to use FMG9s.